Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, it's great to be here. I appreciate the introduction. It's a real privilege to be part of the SBIA event this afternoon. And I also appreciate the privilege of closing out the conference, being the last speaker of the day. Let me move forward with my learning objectives for this discussion today. Today's topics include an overview of the responsibilities of our office and the compliance tools that we use, a review of some of the recent compliance cases, and also how to find publicly available inspection and compliance data. And the topic of this conference obviously has been innovation, and during this discussion, I will be speaking with you about some of the innovative approaches that we employ to address both longstanding risks as well as some of the um, emerging and urgent threats that arise. This chart shows the vast array of responsibilities for which we have oversight in CDER compliance. We have a very broad mandate that's consistent with the breadth and the impact of the market that's regulated by CDER. And our oversight extends from API manufacturers to pharmacies, from clinical trials to post-market safety requirements. We provide oversight over the entire drug life cycle. We conduct post-market good manufacturing practice inspections and monitor compliance with labeling requirements. And we also have oversight of the drug registration and listing database, publish the National Drug Code Directory for all finished and unfinished drug products, and we have oversight of compounding and imports and recalls and post-market compliance. And outside of the approved drug life cycle, we also have responsibility that extends to internet pharmacies, counterfeit drugs, marketed unapproved drugs, and health fraud products. So a very, very broad mandate. This is our mission, and it's something that really guides us every day. Ultimately, what anchors our office is our utmost concern for patients and consumers. Some of the compliance tools that we use are listed here on this slide. Each case that we encounter is unique, and we give a great deal of thought to each one. And determining the right regulatory strategy can really be a multidisciplinary art. But our actions are all based in science and the law. And in an ideal world, we would have 100% voluntary compliance with the law. But we do have many tools in our toolbox to achieve our compliance goals. I'm not going to go through each one here, but these are very important sort of buckets. The stakeholder engagement here that you can see, we engage with stakeholders by issuing guidance, providing training, and advising firms about our expectations. And when we identify areas of non-compliance, we use tools to detect the nature and the extent of those problems. We also send warning letters, we hold regulatory meetings, and we place foreign non-compliant firms on import alerts. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And to mitigate harm, we have the ability to recommend recalls, to administratively detain or seize products, or even to seek injunctive relief from federal courts. And we don't do this work alone. We collaborate across the Center for Drugs and across the agency in just about all that we do. Now, this slide shows some of the metrics that, to give you some insight into our actions over the past year. So last fiscal year, we issued roughly 170 warning letters and inactivated over 19,000 drug listings, classified some 264 recall events that totaled more than 1,100 products, and we placed almost 100 facilities and their products on import alert. And you can also see here at the bottom of the slide additional information about our policy and outreach activities, which are very extensive and a significant part of our work. This slide is a helpful chart, I think, to understand the basis for warning letter violations that are issued. And when we uncover a serious violation of law, then we may issue a warning letter to advise a company about our expectations and to give that company an opportunity to come into compliance. You can see here from this chart that the majority of our warning letters involve drug manufacturing violations or unapproved drug or misbranding violations. And some of our letters have both types of charges. So, for example, if a drug is marketed with unapproved claims to treat a disease and it's also manufactured improperly, we may include a variety of charges. And this really reflects our holistic view of compliance issues. We're not just narrowly focused on one set of issues. We're looking at problems holistically. So it's important to understand that because of our limited resources and just the nature of our work, that we are going to focus on matters that have the highest risks. So what that means is that we're looking at products that have reports of injuries or adverse events, products with significant quality issues, or products that are intended for vulnerable populations, such as children or immunocompromised individuals. Those are just some of the categories of risks that we take into account. And as mentioned, we work very closely with medical professionals and other scientific experts to understand each and every risk. So I mentioned I would be discussing with you some of the recent compliance cases, and I want to talk with you first about a case from last year that is still ongoing. You may be aware of an incident last year where numerous countries were reporting incidents of oral liquid drug products that had confirmed or suspected contamination with high levels of diethylene glycol or ethylene glycol, DEG or EG for short. Now, there were no contaminated product that was found in the United States, but the outbreak spanned at least 7 countries around the world and was associated, sadly, with more than 300 fatalities, mostly in children under the age of 5. And again, no contaminated product in the United States, but this was one of the largest epidemics of DEG poisoning in history. And in fact, similar contamination in the United States back in 1937 actually led to the creation of the modern Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So very, very significant event. And I want to speak with you about some of the activities that we did in CDER's Office of Compliance. An example, this case is a true example of how we pivoted to address an urgent situation, and took innovative and extensive actions to investigate and prevent an outbreak in the United States. So just some of the things that are listed here, we worked with global public health agencies such as the World Health Organization, the CDC, international regulatory authorities, and foreign authorities. And we conducted outreach to healthcare providers and to industry. And in May of 2023, about a year ago, we issued an immediately in effect final guidance on the testing of glycerin and other high-risk drug components for DEG and EG. And this guidance provides recommendations to help pharmaceutical manufacturers or repackers and other suppliers of high-risk drug components and compounders, helps them to prevent the use of drug components that could be contaminated with DEG and EG. Also, to proactively assess if drug manufacturers were conducting required testing to prevent DEG and EG contamination, we issued over 170 requests to firms for records and other information pursuant to 704A4 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The agency also issued warning letters to companies that were unable to provide adequate documentation to us about the required testing designed to prevent DEG contamination, which is a CGMP violation. And we also sent warning letters to those who failed to respond to our request for mandatory records. We placed numerous firms and their products on import alerts for the appearance of CGMP violations or their failure to respond to our records requests. So just a wide variety of activities that we conducted to ensure that contaminated product did not enter the U.S. supply chain. And we remain, of course, very vigilant in this area. So let's move on to the challenge question here. What is the purpose of an FDA import alert? Is it to help stop violative products from being distributed in the United States? To help free up FDA resources to examine other shipments? To alert FDA staff about the appearance of a violation? Or all of the above? You may not be surprised to learn we had a mistake. We had a error in our slide, but it is all of the above. So it was not meant to trick you here. The answer is D, all of the above. A bit of a technical error here on our challenge question slide, but let me review with you why all of the above applies. And I'm gonna go back to the listing so you can see all of the relevant answers. So, import alerts inform FDA field staff and the public that the agency has enough evidence to detain without physical examination. It's called DWPE, products that appear to be in violation of FDA's laws or regulations. So it allows the agency to detain a product without physically examining it at the time of entry. And of course, that then frees up FDA resources to examine other products. The violations could be related to the product, to the manufacturer, to the shipper, or other information. And just another note here, it's important to know that before importing into the U.S., importers should know if their products are subject to DWPE. Okay, let's move on to talk about remote tools. So what do we mean by remote tools exactly? So as part of an inspection, we have the authority to request records from a firm, and in addition, we can also utilize remote oversight tools such as remote interactive evaluations and requests for records or other information in advance of or in lieu of an inspection. And these tools are collectively referred to as remote regulatory assessments. We can use these tools to for a variety of purposes to assess a specific aspect of the manufacturing process, such as required testing, to assess the adequacy of corrective actions, and a number of other purposes for it. To date, we've only issued these requests related to drugs that are not under an application. And as I noted earlier, last year we issued approximately 170 mandatory records requests. Many of those primarily were associated with our DEG and EG compliance work. So I have here on this slide a snapshot of the guidance, and if you're interested in learning more about FDA's use of these tools, I encourage you to take a closer look at that guidance. So let's talk a little bit about the approach that's used to identify, that we've used to identify the basis for adding drugs to import alerts. I mentioned the value of import alert. It serves many, many good purposes. And what this slide depicts here is the basis that underlies the import alert, how we've been able to add drugs to those alerts, and some of the changes that you can see from a few years ago to more recent times. So you can see that there's been an expansion in the basis for our CGMP compliance actions. And previously we had used these tools these remote tools in a more limited way. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, the agency used RRAs to help conduct oversight, as I mentioned, to mitigate risk and to meet the critical public health needs during the pandemic-related restrictions. So you can see from this slide that now we're using information from remote tools and sample collections without an associated inspection to support regulatory action. So this slide describes our work with drug adulteration import alerts and the approach used to identify the basis for adding products and firms to import alerts. So you can see that in FY24, many of the import alert actions were related to remote records requests, particularly in the case that I just mentioned. Now, let me turn to another chart that describes the approach that's used to identify the bases for issuing warning letters. And you can see again that has changed. It has evolved since a few years ago, where the vast majority of the warning letters that were issued were based on inspections. But in more recent times, you can see that the use of remote tools and testing are also forming the basis for warning letters. Now, our prior speaker mentioned that no one wants to hear about statutory language, especially late in the day, and I do not intend to read to you from any of these provisions of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. But reason I have this slide up here is just to kind of highlight some of the key provisions that we use relating to prohibited acts. So, you can see here that it's a prohibited act to introduce or deliver for introduction into interstate commerce an adulterated or misbranded drug. And it's important to understand that even if a company doesn't manufacture its own drugs, it can be held responsible for the adulterated or misbranded drugs that it introduces into interstate commerce. Just as an example, last year we issued a warning letter to a distributor of an ophthalmic product that contracted out the manufacturer of its drugs, and that firm was cited in the warning letter with distributing adulterated drugs. So just a practice pointer here, it is critical to know who you're working with and to know the quality of your suppliers. Okay, I want to now turn to ophthalmic products. This is another significant initiative that our office took on in 2023 and continues into 2024 relating to eye products. Um, as I'm sure you may know, ophthalmic drug products can be concerning from a public health perspective because of how they're used. How they're introduced into the eye, and products that are intended for use in the eye can pose a greater risk of harm because of that route of administration, which can bypass some of the body's natural defenses. And for this reason, ophthalmic products are required to be sterile. Now, most eye products are marketed as over the counter, meaning that they can be marketed directly without an FDA product review or an inspection. And because there's no formal designated opportunity for facility inspection prior to distribution, it can impact the agency's ability to prevent potentially unsafe products from reaching consumers. And we saw a lot of activity in the ophthalmic space in the last year or so, and so wanted to take a few minutes to share with you some of the actions that we took in this space in 2023. And again, these activities do continue into the present. So in 2023, we saw bacterial contamination of 2 non-application drug products that led to a multi-state outbreak involving a rare, extensively drug-resistant strain of bacteria known as Pseudomonas aeruginosa. And even though we pivoted and took swift action in response, the outbreak unfortunately resulted in eye infections, permanent loss in vision, and death due to a bloodstream infection. And while investigating this incident, our compliance team found that in addition to the firm not ensuring that the drug was sterile, it wasn't including a preservative in their multi-dose presentation. And The firm of ultimately was placed on import alert and voluntarily recalled the product that it had on the market. During the year, we kept a vigilant focus on eye products, and there were numerous other actions that we took relating to non-compliant products. So we sent numerous warning letters to firms for current good manufacturing practice violations or adulteration citations or unapproved drugs or both. Um, Specifically, we sent a warning letter to the firm mentioned above with the bacterial contamination, and one to a small manufacturer that didn't realize that eye drops were supposed to be sterile. And those drugs were produced in far from sterile conditions. And that product was recalled. We sent a warning letter to a large US based eye drop manufacturer. And we also issued a collection of warning letters to 8 companies for manufacturing or marketing unapproved ophthalmic products. Some of them had been indicated for cataracts or glaucoma. And in November, we issued a warning letter to an online retailer for distributing 7 eye products that were not generally recognized as safe and effective. Couple of more points I just want to address here in terms of the totality of what we did in this space. We warned the public not to use 2 MSM, methylsulfonylmethane eye drop products after FDA testing identified that there was bacterial contamination or fungal contamination or both in some cases. And then we warned the public last year and oversaw recalls of more than 25 over-the-counter eye drops from major brands after an inspection identified serious concerns at the company manufacturing the eye drops, such as barefoot workers, and positive tests for bacterial contamination. Also, important activities here to promote voluntary compliance and to clarify our expectations. We worked on a draft guidance for quality considerations in eye products that was released last year. And as I mentioned, we continue to be very vigilant in this area. Now, I noted earlier that a number of our compliance actions relate to unapproved drugs. And sometimes this can be a confusing area to people. Federal law does require that all new drugs in the US be shown to be safe and effective for their intended use prior to marketing. However, there are some drugs available in the US that are unapproved, even though they've never received the required FDA approval. And these particularly unapproved prescription drugs can pose significant risks to patients because they have not been reviewed by the FDA for safety or effectiveness or quality. And without that review, there's no way to know if these drugs are safe or effective, or if they're manufactured in a way that ensures consistent quality, or if the label is incomplete and is complete rather and accurate. So unapproved drugs have resulted in patient harm, and we work very diligently to protect patients from the risks that are posed by these drugs. And during that process, we're balancing our goal to eliminate unapproved prescription drugs, balancing that against the need for patient access to medically necessary drugs. Now, let me turn to online marketplaces. We know that many consumers are using online marketplaces for purchasing drugs for the privacy, the convenience, and the cost. And we have been concerned sometimes when we are easily able to identify unapproved or potentially dangerous drugs that are offered for sale by sellers through online marketplaces. For years, the agency has issued public warnings about certain products, such as products with hidden drug ingredients. And we've been able to identify unapproved drugs that were marketed to children, or which was particularly concerning for us. So, as mentioned, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act broadly prohibits any actions that introduce or deliver into interstate commerce unapproved new drugs. And so we, to advise online marketplaces of our concerns, we issued warning letters to a total of 8 online marketplaces for delivery into interstate commerce of various unapproved and misbranded drugs. Uh, Getting into a little more detail here, these were products that were offered for sale by specific uh, sellers, but through the online retailers and delivered into commerce by those online retailers. They related to products such as unapproved eye products, as mentioned, products with unproven claims to treat a condition known as molluscum, a skin condition in children, products with unproven claims to remove moles, products promoted for energy that contained hidden erectile dysfunction drugs, and pain relief products containing a variety of hidden drug ingredients such as muscle relaxants and corticosteroids. So the agency had received reports of serious injury after consumers had used these products, and we took action. As a result, we have seen some changes. Many of the products that were noted in our warning letters are no longer offered for sale by the sellers via the online marketplace. And for certain product categories, we're seeing that an online marketplace now requires third-party testing before the product can be offered for sale. And there was also some consumer notifications that occurred as well. Now, another tool that's not typically associated with compliance is communication. It's an important tool that we use to alert the public to serious safety concerns. We use communication when we issue guidance or hold public meetings, and training is another very high priority for our office. If there are product risks, we want to do everything that we can to ensure that the public is as informed as it can be as soon as possible. And to do that, we issue safety alerts. We issue press releases about quality issues and develop public health education campaigns. And just one recent example of that was related to counterfeit Botox that recently came up after there were several reports that we learned about. We also we do take reports, of course, of counterfeit products very seriously, and we work closely with our colleagues in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, as well as state health departments. And we issued another example I can point to here is a notification about concerning trends relating to weight loss drugs such as bodybuilding products or semaglutide that might be counterfeit or unsafe. And we saw a trend of teens that had been using steroid-like substances known as SARMs. And to combat that, we developed a short video that has had thousands of views. We also identified developed public health education campaigns for unsafe online pharmacies and medication health fraud. So, important part of our work consists of these types of public communications. Now, I want to turn to some information that has been developed that's available to all of you. Um, I think there was some discussion earlier this afternoon about misconceptions about FDA's work, and there are a lot of misconceptions about compliance work. And to address those, we developed this communication tools, several communication tools to address these issues. So, a couple of things that come to mind in terms of those miscommunications. Let's say, for example, public may believe that the FDA can recall drugs, and in most instances, we request that a firm voluntarily recall a product, and our role is to facilitate and classify that recall. Some believe that FDA tests all drugs or tests no drugs, and in fact, the agency does conduct quality testing, and that testing has resulted in warning letters when we identified problems. There's a host of other misconceptions regarding the inspection process, and the 483s, for example, or inspection classification. So, to address these misconceptions and others, we did a few things. First, with our colleagues here at the SBIA, we were involved in developing a webinar called Understanding FDA Inspections and Data. I believe that's available for viewing if you haven't seen it yet, to tell people how this all works, how inspections work, how surveillance work, works, how compliance works, and how you can learn more and find data. We also uh, developed a companion web page that describes drug inspections and compliance actions while dispelling myths. And that page, you can see a snapshot of it here, is called the Pharmaceutical Inspections and Compliance page. So you can search that in your web browser. I encourage you to do that and spend some time navigating through and perusing the site. The page really has a wealth of information about inspections, the types of inspections, about the meaning of various inspection classifications, and about compliance. It also describes the FDA Form 483, which we heard about, and I'm sure you're all familiar with, and its purpose. Um, Talks in more detail about the different classifications that are issued. And you can also review template letters that we use for each inspection classification. And one other point to note is that the page describes the tools that we use, to promote voluntary compliance. So a really helpful tool, and I encourage you all to check it out. Now, that overview page that I mentioned is also connected to something known as the FDA or Data Dashboard. Data Dashboard is also another helpful tool that can help you identify compliance trends. And in the event that you're not already familiar with it, I encourage you to go to this page. And again, it's pretty easy to navigate. You can see the categories on this slide that list all of the information that's available. And the dashboard also allows you to drill down into the details to the company level to show inspection classifications and years, and whether certain firms were issued a warning letter or placed on import alerts. Again, a very good tool for those in regulatory and quality assurance roles. Okay, turning to what the nature of some of our actions. We often get asked about what we're planning for our next compliance actions, and of course we can't disclose what we're planning to do before they happen. But what you see here is a close-up of some of the features on the data dashboard, where you can find, for example, the top 10 drug 483 citations that were issued for a given time period. You can see warning letters that were issued through since 2009, and you can also check facility classifications. At the company level, you should also be able to see associated import alerts as well. Now, I mentioned, when I started, some of the tools that we use, and identified outreach and stakeholder engagement as an important tool. So what I have here is just some of the upcoming events. These outreach activities are really critical to help promote voluntary compliance. You can see here on the slide a number of important events coming up through the summer and fall. And I encourage participation in these. There's also a number of compliance-focused SBIA webinars that are available and posted to the SBIA website. Now, I want to speak about a concept called unified compliance. And I mentioned earlier that the Office of Compliance approaches our issues and tackles our problems holistically. We're looking at our responsibilities in a holistic manner, not just a narrow focus. You may also be aware that the FDA is proposing a restructuring of the organization, in particular as it applies to the Office of Regulatory Affairs. So this is a crucial area programmatically for CDER and for the FDA. And it's worth mentioning here. Currently, ORA, as well as most centers, have separate compliance functions. So that is, both the Center for Drugs have compliance functions, and ORA also has separate compliance functions. Obviously, we have been coordinating together extensively. Under this proposed reorganization, FDA is proposing to merge the compliance activities that are currently managed within ORA into the established compliance programs within the centers. So what that means is that there will be a single unified compliance program for human drugs that will reside within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research and in our Office of Compliance. So we see this as a very important element of the excuse me, of the agency's modernization work, and it should help to really streamline operations and ultimately lead to more efficient decision making. And importantly, it will help to ensure that the FDA is using its resources most effectively and enable us to speak with one voice on compliance matters. So ultimately, we expect that it will really maximize the public health impact that we can have. So just to sort of wrap up here, I'm just approaching the end of the time. CDER's Office of Compliance is dedicated to addressing both the persistent threats that we traditionally see, as well as emerging threats. And when we do, we're able to pivot. We're able to be agile and flexible to remain vigilant and evolve our systems to tackle these difficult problems. And we will also use all of the available tools to safeguard consumers from public health risks. So I want to thank you again for your attention today, and I want to thank SBIA for inviting me to speak with you today. Thank you so much.